In 2020, an American reality show called Murder House focused on renovating America's most infamous murder houses. The first episode featured a seemingly ordinary white house, but locals called it the Death Duplex or Corpse Garden. In the 1980s, the owner, Dorothea Puente, buried 7 bodies in this backyard, shocking the entire nation. She was a seemingly harmless, benevolent old woman. She ran a boarding house specializing in caring for the elderly and vulnerable. Neighbors adored this kind grandmother who was always bringing warm coffee, until 7 bodies were dug out of her meticulously maintained backyard flower beds. That's when people realized those tenants hadn't just moved out. She was cashing their social security checks while secretly burying them in the dead of night. Those hands, which offered warm coffee, never seemed stained with blood. And while neighbors praised her kindness, she was quietly admiring the new additions to her garden. How did this sweet old lady become the Landlady of Death? Today, we'll delve into Dorothea Puente's life, her criminal journey, trial, and the societal impact of her case, attempting to unravel the complex life of the woman dubbed the Landlady of Death. Dorothea Puente, originally Dorothea Helen Gray, was born on the 9th of January, 1929, in Redlands, California, to a working-class family of cotton pickers. Records indicate both parents struggled with alcoholism, leading to a chaotic and unsafe home environment. Her father, in particular, frequently threatened suicide in front of the children, leaving a deep psychological scar on young Dorothea. In 1937, when she was just 8, her father died of tuberculosis. The following year, her mother was killed in a motorcycle accident, leaving Dorothea and her siblings orphaned. After losing both parents, Dorothea was sent to an orphanage, an experience that became the darkest period of her life. There, she endured continuous physical and verbal abuse. After her time at the orphanage, Dorothea lived with relatives in Fresno, California. At 16, desperate to escape her painful past, she married a serviceman, Fred McFall, in 1945. This marriage offered brief stability but also new challenges. Between 1946 and 1948, she gave birth to 2 daughters. She chose to send one daughter to live with relatives and the other for adoption. Her third pregnancy ended in miscarriage, leading to the breakdown of the marriage in 1948. McFall left her, but Dorothea later claimed her husband died of a heart attack. Dorothea's criminal career began in her 20s. In 1948, she was arrested in Riverside for forging checks, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of forgery, and was sentenced to 4 months in jail with 3 years probation. After her release, she continued her fraudulent activities, marrying Norwegian merchant seaman Axel Johnson in 1952. The marriage lasted 14 years, but during this time, she was repeatedly arrested for crimes, including operating illegal boxing matches. In 1960, she was sentenced to 90 days in jail in Sacramento for operating a brothel. These early criminal experiences revealed her obsession with money and ruthless character. After divorcing Johnson, Dorothea married Roberto Puente in 1968, who was 19 years her junior, and adopted the Puente surname. This marriage lasted only 16 months, ending due to Roberto's infidelity, but she kept the Puente surname. Ironically, Puente is Spanish for bridge, and Dorothea Puente certainly became a bridge for many. A one-way trip to their final resting place, while she bridged their social security checks directly to her account. She cultivated a false image of a devout Christian, and under the guise of caring for the elderly and vulnerable, she opened a boarding house. This provided the perfect cover for her later heinous crimes. In the 1970s, Dorothea began working as a nursing assistant, focusing on caring for the elderly and homeless. She operated a 3-story, 16-bedroom boarding house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. Ostensibly, it was a shelter for impoverished and abused women. With an image of generosity and compassion, she earned the community's trust. But in reality, she had begun exploiting these vulnerable individuals for personal gain. In 1976, she married her 4th husband, Pedro Montalvo. But this marriage lasted only a few months. due to his alcoholism and violent behavior. During this period, Dorothea was also indicted on 34 counts of financial fraud. The reason was her systematic exploitation of elderly residents' benefit checks. In 1982, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison for theft, but was released in 1985 after serving only half her sentence. After her release, she began corresponding with Everson Gilmouth, a 77-year-old retired man from Oregon, who picked her up upon her release. During this period, Dorothea began specifically taking in elderly and mentally ill individuals. These people often lacked close family or friends, making them ideal targets. The first murder occurred in 1982. The victim was her friend and business partner, Ruth Monroe. Shortly after moving into Dorothea's boarding house, Monroe died from an overdose of codeine and Tylenol. Dorothea claimed Monroe had committed suicide due to depression over her husband's terminal illness. Police initially accepted this explanation, ruling the death a suicide. From then on, Dorothea's criminal pattern became clear. She used prescription medications obtained from her psychiatrist, like Dalmane for insomnia, to drug her victims, then suffocated them, burying them in the backyard and continuing to cash their Social Security checks. Her victims ranged from 51 to 78 years old, typically isolated elderly individuals with no one to rely on. In 1985, she murdered Everson Gilmouth, placed his body in a self-made wooden box, and dumped it in the river. Continuing to collect his pension, she also forged letters claiming Gilmouth was too ill to contact family, all to cover her tracks. The murders continued for 6 years, until November 1988, when a social worker reported missing resident Alvaro Montoya. During the investigation of Dorothea's boarding house, police noticed unusual soil in the backyard. Excavations uncovered 7 bodies. These included Leon Carpenter, Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and Betty Palmer. All victims were confirmed to have traces of Dalmane poison. It was clear someone had drugged them to incapacitate them, then suffocated them, and finally buried them. Dorothea's trial began in October 1992 and lasted a full year, making it one of the longest murder trials in California history. Over 300 witnesses testified, including victims' families, neighbors, and ex-convicts. Trial and controversy. Dorothea's trial began in October 1992 and lasted a full year, making it one of the longest murder trials in California history. Over 300 witnesses testified, including victims' families, neighbors, and ex-convicts. The prosecution argued that Dorothea was a cold-blooded serial killer who murdered innocent elderly people for money, presenting evidence of the 7 bodies found in her backyard and the Dalmane poisoning. The defense, however, tried to portray her as a generous caregiver, suggesting she might have stolen the victim's checks but wasn't the killer. They also highlighted her childhood trauma, attempting to attribute her actions to psychological issues. During the trial, the jury became deadlocked, with some members finding Dorothea's benevolent image inconsistent with the accusations of a killer. After 3 days of intense deliberation, the jury finally agreed on only 3 counts of murder, sentencing Dorothea to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Despite her conviction, Dorothea consistently denied her crimes, insisting all victims died of natural causes. Psychologists testified during the trial that Dorothea's childhood trauma and orphanage experiences likely led to her pathological obsession with money and control. Her behavior fits the profile of a hedonistic killer, one who kills for pleasure or material gain. Her choice of victims demonstrated high levels of planning. She specifically targeted isolated individuals with no one to check on them, minimizing the risk of discovery. She was also adept at deception and manipulation, earning the community's trust with her benevolent facade, allowing her crimes to remain hidden for a long time. She even meticulously prepared her backyard graves with quicklime and baking soda, then diligently sprayed air fresheners to ensure her garden smelled nothing but delightful. Dorothea finally died of natural causes on the 27th of March, 2001, at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, aged 82. She never admitted her guilt, leaving behind an unsolved mystery. Were her motives purely greed or a more complex psychological distortion? Dorothea Puente's story eventually closed within the prison walls. The kind grandmother who once offered warm coffee and the 7 bodies in her backyard tore open the true horror of human greed and deception. Her life was a story of being both a victim of childhood trauma and a perpetrator who inflicted pain on others. Although the case is closed, its warnings linger. Forgotten, marginalized individuals might still be exposed to danger in the gaps of oversight. From her story, we must understand that beneath gentle appearances, there can be dangerous undercurrents that require vigilance. The meaning of true crime is never to sensationalize fear, but to help us see the complexity of human nature, the flaws in our systems, and to learn to protect ourselves and those around us. As the soil of this death duplex is covered anew, what remains should be a commitment to justice and